My dream come true. Put him on the spot. I'm going to tell you a few things that Mary didn't tell you about Peter. No. Their closet stays between the two of us. Okay, things you should know about Pete Hautman. 1. He writes his book under the name Pete, but I often call him Peters, just so you're not confused. He loves to go hunting for mushrooms. He doesn't like to go shopping for antiques. He loves to revise his work. He can be rather blunt when critiquing someone else's work, possibly someone who doesn't like to revise as much as he does, and does like to go shopping for antiques. He grew up in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, down the street from the filmmaker Coen brothers. His 3 brothers, Joe, Jim, and Bob, the triumvirate, have won the Federal Duck Stamp 12 times, while Peter has never painted a duck. He often works on 2 books at once. He is a world-class cook, specializing in foraged foods, especially mushrooms. He has published over 125 books, many of them winning awards, which Mary went over, and he has written 1 book on slugs. Please welcome. So when Peter and I were talking about doing this together, Mary, bug that she is, asked us for a title. So I asked Peter for a title. And so he came up with Writing for the Long Haul. So I'd like to ask him, what does the long haul mean to you?
The long haul. Well, a lot of writers that I know write 1 or 2 or 3 books, and it doesn't happen the way they think it should. And that's what happened to me too. Is when my first book got a good review in the New York Times, I stopped doing my consulting work and basically thought that, this is it, I had paid. But it didn't sell all that well, and then the second book came out and didn't do much, and the third book came out. And I think if I'd been a slightly different person, I would have gone on to something else. I would have maybe gotten a job. It would have been horrible.
With health insurance.
With health insurance. But what I discovered in the process of writing those books, this was something that I really wanted to do. I enjoyed it. I liked everything about it except the remuneration. And I think that being able to hang on to that joy and a sense of satisfaction. I mean, they say there's nothing as satisfying as finishing your first draft of your first novel. I don't think that's true. I find them all really satisfying to finish. I find them all equally difficult as well. And so I don't know if it's writing for the long haul. I think it has a lot to do with a person's expectations. Anybody can do it. I mean, we've got the brain power to do it, we've got the physical capability to keep on writing and writing and writing, but it's when your expectations run badly afoul of reality that you can't do it. So it takes a lot of adjustments. Mary's been writing even longer than I have.
Centuries.
And being able to roll with those punches is what allows you to achieve longevity as an artist. And it's not just writing; it's any of the arts. I think is persistent. The good thing about writing, though, is it doesn't have the automatic cutoff, like if you're a dancer or a football player or an actor. You can keep doing it even when you're old and ugly.
your first books that you were talking about, the ones that did moderately well and slightly tapered, were crime capers for adults.
Right.
And then maybe you should talk a little bit about how you slid into YA and how was writing for teenagers different?
Well, my first young adult book is not really what I would consider a young adult book. I wrote it as an adult novel, and I showed it to my agent, and my agent basically said, "This sucks. Go write some more Joe Crow mystery novels." And I was confused because I thought it was a pretty good book. So I showed it to some friends of mine. I showed it to my friend Reggie Zimmerman. And he said, "Well, I think this is a young adult novel." And I said, "What's that?" No, I thought, "You mean like for people in their 20s? I wasn't familiar with the term. And he said, "No, it's for teenagers." And I said, "Really? Why is it that?" He said, "Well, your main character's a teenager for most of the book. The character starts out at 10 years old, then goes to 80 years old in the course of the book. But for the big chunk of it, he's a teenager." So I got the name of a young adult agent and sent it there, and the book sold within 7 days.
Hmm.
And got a New York Times notable.
Ooh.
That was Mr. Was. Yeah. And then I started getting invitations to go to schools to talk about this book because teens really did love it. And so I started looking at what is young adult literature, and I decided that young adult literature was something completely different than what I had just written. Because it really was in no sense a coming-of-age story. It was not about the experience of adolescence. It wasn't really speaking the language of adolescence. So then I tried to write what I thought was a kind of an iconic young adult novel, and I wrote my next one, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, I really liked writing for that age because that's the age when you could stay up all night reading, when you didn't have all these hypercritical skills that you're developing right now that prevent you from enjoying bad books like you used to like. There's nothing for me kind of crushing than running across a copy of a childhood favorite and picking it up and going, "This sucks."
Peter, we don't use that highly technical language here. We've been talking a lot about theme in this residency. I scared Peter to death when he knows nothing that I'm going to ask him. Sometimes it's best to keep them in the dark. But I did warn him about theme. So you have written YA books that are sci-fi, that are suspense, that are even romance after your huge failure reading Pride and Prejudice.
I did get through it.
Okay.
It took 10 years.
So do you see a
Just
theme?
lost the audience.
Do you feel like you have a theme running through your books, or a theme in many of your books that you'd like to talk about here?
Well, you did mention that theme might come up, so I went and looked it up. Really, theme is an oily word. It's like spiritual. The more you think about it, the slipperier it gets. I mean, we think casually, "Oh, I know what theme is. I know what it means to be spiritual," and then you start to dive into it, and it's not so obvious anymore.
So you don't know.
I do. Because I was thinking about, when I thought, well, she asked me about theme in my books, I'm going to say, I don't really think about theme. I just write the story, and then a theme emerges, and sometimes I don't know what it is until someone tells me. But then I started thinking about the genesis of my books, and I realized that most of them start with theme. Godless, for example, it's a book about a kid that starts his own religion, worshiping a water tower. And I think most people would read the book. What's the theme? Religion. Well, that's not the theme. The theme is the acquisition and application of adult-sized power by an adolescent. And when I first started working on Godless, I wanted to do, again, I was aiming to do an iconic YA novel. And I thought that's what many, if not most, YA novels have in common, is it's a young person who is confronted with a big adult-type problem, or they have some kind of adult-type power, and they need to figure out how to use that power. I mean, everything from that dragon book, Aragon, to Harry Potter, or whatever, it's what happens when you have the power? There's a plus, there's a minus, there's the difficulty controlling it, there are the consequences of using it. And so I started out writing a book about a kid who got a gun. So I thought, that's elemental. But that was around the time of the Columbine shootings. And I just decided I didn't want to write about that. So then I was going to write about a female character who was using her newly discovered sexual allure to gain power over her boys and girls and arrogant. Because I was thinking about how 8th, 9th grade, 10th grade, a lot of times a skinny little girl you would never notice goes away and she comes back the next fall and she's transformed herself. I remember how powerful that was to all of us when all of a sudden there would be this creature that's making everybody's hormones jump. I thought that's a power thing, of a female character using this physical beauty. And I thought, well, or I could do it about a guy whose physical strength kind of comes into his physical strength and allows him to have athletic prowess. And it wasn't until I'd been thinking about this for several months that I came up with the idea of using, starting a religion as being a way of being adult-type power. So, that's, a lot of my books start out with those kind of thematic things, and then you tack on character and story and subject. Like Sliders, you read it, okay, it's about eating contests. Well, no, it's not really about eating contests. It's about family and birth order.
Well, I'm really glad.
Is that too much?
No, that was not only not too much, it was really, I think, what we need to hear again and again, which is this is hard work. We often don't know where we're going. We wander around in the wilderness, being somewhat crabby, and
Did Kelly say that early in the session here? None of us know what the hell we're doing.
So I'm going to ask a Claire question. How does this theme relate to your life?
What theme?
The one you just told us about.
Oh, the godless one?
No, I mean the getting power as a teenager, the acquisition. Did I just hear that?
No, I mean I think it's a momentous occasion for all young people to suddenly realize they have power. I mean, one of the earliest things I remember is I grew up in a big family. There's a lot of rough housing. And when I was about probably 5 or 6 years old, I was running full speed down the hall, and my father was in the bathroom, and he opened the door, and I did like a Superman thing. I charged and punched him right in the belly. And it actually hurt him, and I was shocked.
I bet he was too.
It was, we knocked the wind out of him. But then that keeps happening at every age, and it becomes very dramatic for teens, because teens are almost adults. Physically, they're 90% of the way there. And every time a teen figures out, well, I can do this, I have the strength to do this, I'm smart enough to do this, and it's really scary when they realize that they're smarter than adults, which we all were when we were teens, because I think it probably starts to decline at about age 18. They've got the horsepower, they don't quite have the finesse yet, but it's a really exciting thing. And if you're lucky, and I think I am lucky, it never goes away. I mean, I love learning to do new things to this day. You know, whether it's learning to juggle, learning to cook something, learning to, I mean, you see in my books that first person, third person, mixed first and third person, present tense, past tense, female protagonist, male protagonist. And that's one of the things that excites me about writing new books, is I always like to do something that I don't know if I can do it, something that I've never done before, something that scares me a little bit. Because you know, I think the best writing comes from sort of this weird combination of competence and terror.
You know, I really saw that in Big Crunch because, again, you know, after struggling with the language of romance on many levels, you you really took that on, and I think almost because you didn't know all the, you know, I see romance as being as structured and very, very, very similar to suspense, and with almost the same steps. And but what I saw, especially in the scene in the was it an essay? The first kiss scene, so awkward, but so believable and so inviting in an odd way because of the awkwardness. You know, you could really squirmily imagine yourself being there, and so bravo. Do you see, now kind of separate from theme, but do you see a common thread running through your work? I think you've kind of been talking about it with both the theme of power and the theme of trying to explore new things through your work.
Yeah.
Anything else come to mind?
Well, I did a series of long interviews with a librarian, Joel Shoemaker, and he published in one of those small print presses. He read all my work, he read all my books. Mary's the only other person in the world that's done that. And he was struggling to find a commonality in a theme. And he couldn't really come up with too much, except he said, in a lot of your books, people get knocked unconscious. Which is something I hadn't been aware of.
Have you been knocked unconscious?
Yes.
That explains it.
It explains But no, I don't, I think, I'm sure that there are things that all my books have in common. And you know, I'm sure there are language things and sentence structures and all kinds of irritating little glitches in there. Other than the big YA theme of a young person taking on power and applying it, or being forced to find power to deal with a situation, other than that, I try to make them as different as possible.
Well, so in that same vein, so now you've also started writing middle grade, and I'm curious if you're doing that because you wanted to write middle grade, or B, you had a story that demanded to be written as a middle grade.
Well, if you'll recall, we wrote the Bloodwater Mysteries, and that was 2005, 6, and 7, somewhere in there. What we were telling each other we kind of wanted to do was to recreate the reading experience that I had with the Hardy Boys and Mary had with Nancy Drew. We wanted it to be a not so gender specific, and we wanted it to be more modern, more current. And so we took that Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, Edward Stratemeyer, whatever his name is, kind of formula of short chapters, cliffhanger ending at the end of each chapter, mystery unraveling, and we had 2 detectives in there. And I really enjoyed it. And So I just decided to write a book that was really fun to write. So I wrote a book called Water Factor, with a girl main character who's sort of a Pippi Longstocking meets Nancy Drew meets Encyclopedia Brown meets Anne Shirley. You know, so naturally she has red hair. And it was really fun. It was really fun to just kind of go more into the middle grade mindset. Put in some bodily function jokes that don't fly in YA fiction. I mean, you just can't pull off a good fart joke for teenagers. They don't find it amusing at all, but 9-year-olds, it's hilarious. And a lot of other kind of more slapsticky kind of things, and it was really fun to write. So I wrote another one, and then I wrote Slider, and I've got another one coming out next year. To me, YA fiction, sometimes I get a little overwhelmed by all the angst, Axe body spray aspect of it. And going to write for just a slightly younger audience just really makes me happy.
You've also written 3 series. One you mentioned, the Bloodwater series with me. And one thing I want to say about the Bloodwater series that I thought was really interesting was that we had 2 protagonists, a male and a 14-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl.
13 going on 14, 16.
Yeah. And I think we alternated chapters, I can't quite remember, but I assumed that I would write, before we started it, that I would write the girls sections and he would write the boys sections. And that not only didn't happen, it almost reversed. We wrote it the way I write anyway, and I think Pete does pretty close to the same, which is, so I would write a chapter, and then I'd send it to Pete, and then he'd totally rewrite it. And then he'd write one and then send it to me, and I would totally rewrite it. And that's kind of what we do with our own work. So when I'm starting in the morning, I go over what I wrote the day before and kind of do a real quick rewrite and then go into the new, and that really helps me get into the flow of the story. But my question to you, my dear, is, so you've done Bloodwater, the Water Factors, and the Klaatu Discos, each series, those are series, and what does one have to be aware of or be conscious of when you're taking on such a task? You know?
Well, the Bloodwater stories were each
Separate.
pretty separate and complete on their own. The Klaatu Discos was really, well, I guess I have to be honest here, don't I?
I might hold you to it.
I had about a 1,000-page book I wanted to write. I had a story in mind. But I needed money. And I knew it was going to take me at least 3 years to write it. So I sold it as a 3-book series. In other words, I finished the first third of it and then sold the 3-book series. And I hadn't yet written the second or the third book, and I really didn't know what was going to happen. So it was very difficult to have already sold something and have it in the can, and then have to, I mean, I'm used to, like, I was working on something the other day, and I go, oh, I should have a cigarette in the scene, because this is a character that would probably smoke. Well, he'd been in 8 other scenes earlier in the book, so I had to go back in and insert that he was a cigarette smoker. And if you've got something that's already gone through editing, and you're working on the second, third novel, I go, oh, well, you know, I should have had that character have a missing canine tooth or whatever. You can't go back and fix it. So it felt, by the time I got to the end of it, very, very claustrophobic. So I don't recommend it.
You know, I was asking you about threads, but I really wanted to talk to you too in somewhat the same vein as writing a series, you've written a number of books that involve time travel, which is always a fun organizational thing to take. Yeah. So Mr. Was,
Right.
and The Plot Through Discos, and now Otherwood.
Otherwood, yes. It's sort of time travel.
Yeah.
It's more a parallel universe.
Okay, so again, I think that, it's something that some of the people in this room might be thinking about doing, and I think there are pitfalls and things to be aware of and concerns to know as you're going into doing that kind of work. So how do you keep track of where you are and where your characters are?
Well, when I wrote Mr. Was, it was post-it notes and strings on the wall. For the Plot Through Discos, I had timelines for each individual character. I had to write them out. I mean, one of the hard things with not just time travel, but any fantasy device, is usually you need to lay the rules down for the reader fairly early. Because you don't want to have them go 7/8 the way through the book, and then say, oh, and by the way, if you walk through the door backwards, then you blah, blah, blah. And it's difficult to come up with a succinct set of rules for a fantasy device sometimes that you can convince them to slip into the first quarter of the book. That's going to work for you for the whole rest of the book. And what was the question?
Just, you're pretty much answering it. I mean, again, that issue of creating a world with its limitations and structure, and then trying to write within the confines of this world that you created. And how do you, well, again, especially for writing a series, how complicated that gets, as you have already said. But even within a book, how do you keep track? You do maps sometimes, I know. Because in Plot Through Discos, people are going through wormholes to different times and places, and that got...
Yeah, I had to introduce in that one to solve some of the problems. I had to introduce some portable time barriers, which look like big slugs that like swallow people.
Always handy.
But yeah, I mean, making those. The same thing is true in. I remember reading years ago a discussion between some science fiction writers, as Jerry Pournell and and they were talking about the difficulty of writing a mystery in a science fictional universe. Because they had these huge info dumps to say, yes, the spaceship can go this fast, this character can do this, and this. You need to explain all that. Whereas you're writing a conventional mystery, you know how fast an airplane goes, you know what a 45 fires and how many slugs it has in, you know what it takes to die here. I mean, it's the world we live in, and you have to deal with any of that stuff. But in sci-fi and fantasy, you need to explain a lot. And in fact, in children's literature, you need to make a lot of things clear to people in adult literature. Like I was writing a book, and I had a scene with Don Rickles and Johnny Carson in the year 1969. And I kind of, at that point in the book, I thought I was writing a YA novel. But then I found out that I had to do all this history stuff, and I go, no, I'm writing a novel for geezers. Otherwise, I have to go and explain who's Don Rickles, who's Johnny Carson. Why did he have to get up from his couch to change the channel on the television set?
And I think we all do even run into some of those problems in world building in contemporary time. In one of my mysteries, I didn't want them to be able to have cell reception. Well, I'm really lucky because my mysteries are set in the Bluff country. So I could say she couldn't get reception there. And it's gotten harder to write mysteries when you can connect with someone all the time, every place. You run into problems, they have to lose their cell phone, or it has to be stolen, or somehow you have to sometimes subtract what we have right now. So I mean, those are, but again, I just think that what you were saying before too, of like creating this wonderful world, and you're just, and then you're in it writing, and all of a sudden you just run into a wall that you yourself have created. That you've got a plot point that you're not sure how you're going to make it work because you've put a real obstruction in your own way.
That reminds me, one of my early book sales was a picture book, and I sold it to a company called Child's Book. And it was the story of a boy who claims that he has a rhinoceros in his bedroom and no one believes it. And the whole plot circled around him borrowing his mom's camera, learning how to use it, taking the film out, taking it to the film developer, and having to wait for the film to come back.
This was many years
This was
ago.
like 1990 or 91, a pre-digital camera. And the publisher got it, and they were looking for an illustrator, and they were kind of sitting on it, and a couple of years went by, and I wasn't too worried about it. And then they finally said, no, we can't do anything with this because people have cell phones and digital cameras and things like that. So they let me keep the money and gave me the rights back. If anybody wants a horribly dated book about a rhinoceros.
Yes. Well, that's a wonderful segue to my next question, which is about a book you wrote called Rash, in which you set it in the 2070s, is it, or 2080s?
2074.
In which you imagined many changes in the future, and then within the next few years I watched you tick off the changes you thought wouldn't happen for 60 years happening as we were both watching McDonald's take over prisons and various things that you had seen much further down the line. But so now I'm going to kind of move into publishing. What has changed since you started publishing, since you really have been doing it for the long haul, and what maybe more importantly, what do you see coming down the pike for all of us? It was interesting, I'll just interject that that I think that when we knew that Kindle type of technology was going to be available before it was a real concern. And I think it has not affected publishing as much as at least I thought it was going to. Yeah.
There's a thing that started happening, or at least that I started noticing in the 1990s. And that was baby boomers, of which I'm kind of in the middle of the baby boom, were having kids. The kids were starting to move out of the house. A lot of them had money, a lot of them had leisure time, and they were highly educated as a group, and they all wanted to write books. And there was, starting in the 1990s, there was a flood of authors appearing. And it has, if anything, become more and more intense. There's a lot of people writing books out there, and we've got a lot more technology now. So material, this is a great time to be a reader.
Right.
You want to find a book about a one-legged Portuguese gay detective, there's probably a series out there. But I don't know what's going to happen. Right now, there's a lot of people who are self-publishing, and some people are doing it very effectively. Some people are doing it just electronically. Some people are still filling their garages up with books they're not going to sell. And kind of the market is trying to figure out how important are the gatekeepers. You know, how important are the editors and the publishers? You know, is there a future for them, or are we moving toward, you know,
Anarchy.
And you know, I don't know if I'm going to be around long enough to really find out what happens, because I think we're looking at a 50-year.
But remember McDonald's and the pizza? It happened much quicker than you thought it was going to.
Yeah. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm very interested to find out, though. I mean, I feel very fortunate that I started publishing in the early 90s when still traditional publishing was the only reasonable choice. I mean, self-publishing at that time was completely dominated by predatory companies. That were just out to take people's money. Now there's some more legitimate ones. Still predator ones.
It was even called vanity publishing, which that phrase has pretty much gone away.
Yeah. But you know, I was able to get in and kind of learn how to write books and sell books and derive some income from it. And so I don't have any plans. I wrote a book about poker. It was a kind of a book of quotations and little anecdotes and things, mainly in poker players. And I decided to self-publish it. So I went through it several times. Mary did some line editing. I hired a copy editor, get it copy edited. I got somebody to proof it. And I was going to make it into a book. I have a bit of a design background, so I figured I could do it. And one of Mary's publishers, Midlist Press, said, well, hey, if you want to self-publish that thing, you can come in and use our equipment. We've got all the, the whole book publishing thing, and get it typeset and so forth. And I looked into printing it, and I print 500 copies of this, and I went there to the publisher, and they set me up, and she showed me how to use the new version of Quark Express. And I downloaded the book, and I started looking at the pages, and I thought, what the hell am I doing? You know, I just realized that I would actually be spending more time trying to sell the thing than I'd spent writing it. And
you wouldn't be writing your next book.
right, exactly. So that was the right decision for me, but someone else could have published that book and done very well with it.
Okay, so too often we present the writer's life as just a wonderful, fun-filled, exhilarating ride. Could you tell us about one of the deepest pits of despair moments in your career? Do you have any of those? Maybe.
Probably not as many as I should. Well, actually, one of them was last summer. That was pretty bad. I had a contract for a book with Simon & Schuster, and a lot of my artistic decisions start with I need money. So the year before, in 2016, I was feeling kind of broke. You know, it was like June, and I had enough money to get through like December maybe. And I had a couple of books I was working on, but I was nowhere near close to finishing. Okay, I wrote a book called Invisible that Simon & Schuster did pretty well with. So I contacted my agent and asked her, first I talked to my editor and I said, look, I want to write a sequel to Invisible. Would you be interested in that? I didn't have an idea for it. And he said, yeah, I think so. So I had my agent submit a formal proposal, and they said, great, we'll do it. Got the contract, sent me a check, working on the book. I told him I'd have it by January. January came and went. We had a new president. It was harming my psyche. And I just could not concentrate. And I had about 80, 90 pages done on this book. It was going to be a pretty short book. It was only going to be about 160 pages, I figured. And I just couldn't move forward with it. I mean, I'd work on it every day. I'd pull up this manuscript and I'd write some stuff and I'd delete some stuff and I'd move stuff around. And it just wasn't happening. And my editor says, where's the book? I need a couple more months on it. March comes, where's the book? I think I can have it for you by May. May comes and goes. Still working on it. I'm up to page 110. And I hate it. I hate opening this thing. I don't hate what I've written, but I hate where I think the story's going. And it was just like every day I'd get up, hi, new day, and I'd turn on my computer and
There it be.
there it'd be. It was bad. So, June, July, August, still not making any progress on it. Totally unproductive. I'm not working on anything else. Because I figure I can't work on anything else because this is what I have to do. I have a contract. I've got their money. They won't give me the rest of the money until I write the book. And in early August, I just one day said, screw it. I'm not going to write this book. I'm just not going to write this book. I'm going to write something completely different. And so I started working on a new book that I had the idea from for a while. I actually had about 20 or 30 pages written. And it felt so good. I'm within a few weeks of finishing the first draft of the replacement book. Now, when I called my editor and I said, David, I can't do it. I can't write this book. I want to write a different book. And he said, what's it about? And I said, well, it's like a road trip book. He says, okay. That's fine. I've been working with him since 1993, so there's a little trust. But that was bad, to know that I'd failed and to have worked so hard on it for so many months. It was just deadly.
Well, we're coming, I want to leave time for you guys to ask equally difficult and in-depth questions of Pete, but I do have a couple more things. One is, now that we've covered the deepest pit of despair, where do we go? What do you wish in the beginning of your long haul that you would have known or that someone would have pulled you into?
That I could do it. One of the best things that happened to me as a writer was when I finished the first draft of my first novel, which shall remain unpublished. And I read it and I recognized that it had problems and I didn't think it was saleable. But I'd done it. And after that, I always knew I could do it until last summer, when I couldn't. But having that confidence to kind of like plow blindly forward and having enough of a belief in myself that I will be able to pull this off. It might not look like it right now, but I can do it. You know, I have the skills, I have the drive, et cetera, et cetera. That really helps getting over the humps. In fact, that novel that I set aside, I didn't actually discard it. It's still on my computer, and I might go back to it someday. But that, what was the question?
I don't know, but you can answer. So, where are you going? What are you working on? Where do you see yourself moving in the future?
I'm working on another middle grade novel that's based on my most scariest childhood horror, a recurring nightmare that I had for years. And I've always wanted to write about it. I never quite felt like I was ready to do it, so I'm going to try to write that.
You're not gonna tell us what that is? I'm not saying you should.
I don't know what it is, that's the problem. It's just really bad,
Okay,
really, really bad.
okay.
It's in the middle bedroom.
I'm looking forward to it.
Mary's not in it, right? Oh, this was a early nightmare.
Look at that, I'm working on finishing up the YA novel that replaced the YA novel that I got stuck on. I'm working on an adult novel, one with Don Rickles, that I've been working on for about, I don't know, 12, 13 years. And that's a really fun book. That is, the structuring of it is so utterly non-traditional. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be acceptable to anyone, but I was having a gas writing it. It has elves in it. I was writing it before you copied me. Because Mary and I read all of each other's work, there's always bleed through. So like, she's just wrote a book with a character named Siggy. I'm working on a book with a character named Stiggy.
And that's how deep it gets. Okay, I am going to open it up to questions, and then we're going to do that for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to take an extremely short break, and come back. Yes.
Oh, question.
Question.
Yes.
Mary!
I do. But it's actually more of a comment, a kind of teaching moment comment. Because early on you talked about writing for the long haul. And then you ended talking about the deep pit of despair and how you got through it. And then, what did you learn that I can do it? And I took a lot from that. And so my comment is thank you for that, but also that in addition to part of being in it for the long haul and having the confidence that you can do it is also having the resilience to live through failure and disappointment and get back up again. And those of us who are older, younger people have had disappointments and failures too, of course. But those of
But
us...
there's nothing compared.
And there's nothing compared with... I'm in a writers group, Women Who Whine, W-I-N-E, that has some major people in it in terms of accomplishment. And yet, half of them at this point, having had huge accomplishments in their writing life, are going through a fallow period and deep disappointments and rejections. And what some of them have done, I'm not going to write again. And what others have done is live through the slough of despair, and then just say, screw it. I'm getting up again, I'm writing another book. Sell it or not, that's who I am. And it's part confidence that I can do it, and it's part I have no choice. I must go on. So, confidence and resilience, and being able to live with that despair and that failure.
Yeah, I want to add one other thing, because I think Peter kind of talked about it too, but I also think for me, what really brings me often to despair is the outside world. In other words, response to something I'm doing, or no response at all to something I'm doing. And so what I have found too is to remember that I love doing this, that how much fun it can be. And I really feel with the book that I read at the beginning, that was a book that just brought me, as you were saying, great joy. And I had so much fun writing it that it really kind of reinvigorated me for this whole,
Okay, so when you lose your way, and you're saying you remember it through the joy, what do you do? Is it just you get in there and write, you shut out the outside world? How does that work for both of you?
Do you want to?
For me, it helps to start something new. I love starting. I love like taking a basic idea and doing that first couple pages of notes. That's what works for me. Sometimes I can do it by rereading a project that I've set aside, and I always find things to change, and I always find problems with it. But I always find a lot that I like about it. You know, I can read something I wrote several months ago, and I go, ooh, that was
For me, it's really about exterior, interior. When I am writing and I get too caught up in other people's response, what's going on in publishing, I don't know what I'm doing, all that jangly stuff. But when I come back to myself and say, what do you want to write? What do you want to write about? Where are you right now? And again, I mentioned that this was a book that I had been thinking about for 12 years, and then I think almost too, we often think that magic is outside of ourselves, and I think when I was in Iceland, one of the things I figured out was that magic is also very much inside me. And that I think writing is really as magical for me. And almost to be more open to what the world is kind of giving you, that maybe if you're worrying about publishing, you're not seeing. So I think going back to myself and really taking care of myself, being gentle with myself, and really saying, where do you want to go? Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about like working on 2 projects at the same time. Can you speak a little bit about that process and keeping, just how that works? How you organize them and keep your books from bleeding?
one of the things that when I talk in middle schools and high schools that I recommend to young people that want to write is I say get involved in theater. Not as an alternative to writing, but as preparation for it. There's a lot of writers that I've known that are really good at what they do. In fact, one of them, I believe, is here tomorrow, Little Gray, have some theater background. And one of the things that you learn how to do as an actor is to be inside different people, to move from character to character. And I love seeing a play where they'll have one actor that's playing 2 or 3 different people. And I think pretty much everyone can do it. You do it with, we all do it with code switching. Like when I'm talking to Mary, I'm using different language than I'm using talking here. I'm using very different language if I'm talking to a cashier at the grocery store. I mean, we all speak these multiple languages. And I think in writing, once you reach a certain level of comfort and competence with laying down sentences and paragraphs, which you probably virtually all have, it's not difficult to switch tones. So I can be working on a book that's written in the first person, and I can be writing on it, and I get something and I'm stuck. I'll say, okay, I'm going to go make a sandwich, take a nap, go for a walk, then come back and work on something different. And I'll go to a different book that's maybe written present tense, third person, with a different set of characters, a different thing. And I just slide right into it. It's like I don't get them confused at all.
But you do take a break there, though, too.
A little break helps, yeah. And I don't know if that's something I could have done when I was first trying to write my first novel. At that time, I just had so much trouble finding voice, finding tone, dealing with pacing and stuff like that. I needed to really focus on it. But I found, after when I was working on my second book, I would get stuck sometimes, and I could stay stuck for hours or days. I don't know what happens next. Okay, I've got this story at this point, I don't know where I'm going. And well, I'll just work on something else. So I started working on multiple projects at a time. And it's a great way to stay productive. Because sometimes you're stuck and you just need to let it sit for a while. You need to let some of those knotted up mental muscles give them a chance to relax so that they don't keep sending you into the same thought loop that leads you nowhere. But you don't have to not write to do that. You can write something completely different.
Here, we've got time for one more. Way back, Elliot.
Hi. I was such a fan of Eden West, your book that came out a couple years ago.
Thank you.
Which had like main characters who might or might not be part of this messianic cult. Like the reader doesn't know for a long time. And what I was so impressed by was your like slow delivery of the information about the world, so the curtain just very slowly raised. And I wondered if that was an intuitive process for you, or when you have a really structured world building like that, if you have a plan going in, or how do you manage the reader's experience as you write?
It feels intuitive, but I don't know that it is. I think it's a learned skill set. I did a lot of adjusting on that book, going back through, taking things out, putting things in, and trying to get the pacing right, because I knew it's not a sock you in the jar opening, really. You're kind of gently invited into this world, and I know the first couple chapters that I had to revise dozens of times to kind of get them where I wanted. But I don't know if I was thinking of it. I don't think it was a completely intellectual thing. It was more like, does this feel right? And if it doesn't, a lot of times I'd go back and I'd rewrite it without knowing exactly what I was doing. I would just, well, this doesn't feel right, I'm going to do it different. How does it feel right? No, it's going to do it different. And so it's sort of a combination of the two things.
We have to take a short break, so just a couple minutes.